Thank you so much, everyone, for coming, particularly those who have travelled around the country to visit Wellington today. I'm Billy Clemens. I'm the Head of Policy and Advocacy. I look after our government relations, keeping in touch with NZTA, Ministry of Transport, the ministers in this building, the officials, NZTA and MOT who work up the road, along with my levelled up team since the restructure with Mark Stockdale and Rowan Everton, who's real strong transport advocates, and it's great to have so much horsepower and capacity, which is really paying off with the work that we're doing. So look, as Cam said a bit earlier before, really cool to be in Parliament today, and give some good examples of why Wellington's here. Tomorrow at your sector group catch-ups, those are actually going to be in the select committee rooms, and that's where Transporting New Zealand comes along with our detailed recommendations to make to those MPs and politicians, and that's how we actually get real runs on the board and real changes. Now, if I think of some recent examples, we were recently at the Transport and Infrastructure Select Committee talking about new changes to road tolling rules, which included a proposal to force trucks to use toll roads rather than alternative routes. And due to some good advocacy there, we've been able to restrict the situations in which trucks are going to be forced to use those roads, and also make sure that you don't end up with really high monopoly pricing when you're using those routes. So a good example of the benefits of us being here, being able to look officials in the eye, and also build helpful relationships. So today I'm going to be talking a bit about our advocacy plan and what you're going to be hearing from us as we head into a really big election year. Look, whenever the media, officials or MPs meet from Transporting New Zealand, they know that our asks and our policy priorities come from you. They come from our sector groups, they're evidence-based and they're credible. There's a lot of lobby groups in Wellington, there's a lot of people who'll send press releases out, but what the board and what our members expect is that we have done the research, we're well evidenced, and that our advice and submissions can be trusted. And I think that's why you've seen Transporting New Zealand's media presence really start to grow. It's in the mainstream media, on the news, on the airwaves, being called out to different transport policy committees all around councils, those kind of situations. So I think that's really paying off. So to step through to our policy priorities, and I'm looking forward to the launch of our election platform in August this year. We'll be able to step out the detail. But look, there's some real good fundamentals here today around securing New Zealand's food supply, ensuring that road maintenance stays at the top of the political agenda, supporting infrastructure and making sure that even though we've got a big infrastructure wish list, making sure that those essential roading improvements stay right at the top of the list. Safer roads through smarter enforcement, making sure that we've got freight productivity emphasised, and supporting our future workforce, because we know that we're heading towards real challenges with our driving workforce. So moving on to securing New Zealand's fuel supply, and it's been touched on briefly by Dom and Cam already today, but earlier in the year the whole country got a really hard lesson about how essential diesel is to the country. When we were in crisis meetings with Minister Willis, with Minister Bishop, you know, the other fuel types, the motor gas and your aviation fuel, like that's really important, but actually the priority was diesel, and it really got driven home that actually, even though transport's using 70% of it, it's also essential for your agriculture, essential for your manufacturing, your production. And so I think that the silver lining from this really tough crisis for the industry is that it's really emphasised how important it is to have a resilient diesel supply. I think it's really shown up how vulnerable we are in this section of the world. You've got a graph over there that shows that the Asia-Pacific region really isn't where you want to be during a fuel crisis, because we've got huge demand and very little supply. 39 million barrels of oil of demand and 7.7 million barrels produced. And so that's why Asia-Pacific particularly got really hammered by the fuel crisis. And then, of course, if you're a Grant Thornton index reviewer, transport cost index reviewer, you would have seen that spike. That dotted line there is the forecast increase in the next index. So for the first time since about June 2023, transport inflation is through the roof compared to CPI. So transporters will continue to wear that. And that's the clear message that we've been making through to officials is we need to be upping our onshore fuel stock holding because 21 days isn't cutting it, and moving it up to 28 days by 2028 isn't going to do it. And we need to have our road network, our bridges strengthened to make sure that we can have more fuel efficient, high productivity motor vehicles operating. Speaking of the roads and the HPMV network, this leads us on to road maintenance and how we're going to keep that at the top of the agenda. So in 2023, we had a road maintenance election campaign. Potholes were all over the place. You had politicians, particularly Simeon Brown, highlighting the fact that, look, it was a safety risk, it was completely unacceptable, it was slowing the economy down. And you can see, actually, that even starting under the previous government, that line graph there, a big hike between 2022 and 2023 in road maintenance. The only thing that we need to keep in mind there is that even though the amount of money being spent has gone up, and look, we do give some credit to local councils and central government for prioritising that, at the same time, your costs of every lane metre of maintenance has gone up by 36%. So this year during the election, every political party is going to tell you they're going to spend more money on road maintenance. That's just not going to do it because keeping things at the same level is a real terms cut. And so that's why we're going to be emphasising what we need to do. The cost of having road closures, you know, the fact that when Waiawika Gorge between Gisborne and Tauranga closed, that was costing transporters and their customers $500,000 a week. I think actually that photograph is from a member of ours on, was it Tineroto Road? And that was a great example of TNZ's membership team being able to go out and advocate on a particular issue. We made some noise in the media, we talked about it, and as a result it got shifted up the queue. So my message on road maintenance is you'll keep on hearing that from us. We need to keep doing more. And if you have a particular issue, get in touch with Jim, Lindsay, Keith or John, because we do get in touch with NZTA and get stuff moved up and emphasised. On infrastructure and growth, New Zealand needs to keep delivering the safer, growth-orientated infrastructure that we need. So everyone knows that we've got a real problem with infrastructure delivery in New Zealand, that the infrastructure projects outlast governments, doesn't fit with the 3-year election cycle, and you end up with really expensive cancellations and U-turns. And there was a recent report that came out from Shamobil Yakov estimating that that's cost us $11.8 billion over the last 25 years, is the delays and the waiting and the cancellations. Now I just put that graph up there, which shows the purple line is what we want to spend, and that's if we want things like the Auckland Harbour crossing, whether that's a tunnel or a bridge, if we want a second Mount Vic tunnel, if we want an expressway between Auckland and Northland. So there is a real gap that's currently being filled by the Crown, or it's just not getting done. And that's why it's really important to have Transporting New Zealand and our supporters making the case for those roading investments, because there will continue to be pressure put on when roading is competing against stuff like hospital infrastructure, health infrastructure, education and schools. So I think there needs to be some tough decisions about what happens with increasing fuel excise duty and road user charges for the first time since 2020. So I'm really looking forward to the political panel where we're going to hear from the MPs and ministers about what they're planning on doing. Moving on to safer roads, that's a photo that Dom nicked from his presentation. That's CVST in Nelson completing some random roadside drug testing of trucking operators. So it's rolled out. All CVST nationally are able to complete those tests, and the clear message has gone out to say that heavy vehicles will be a priority for that area, and heavy vehicle transporters, the message is, look, actually, apprehension positive rates are lower than they expected, which I think reflects really well on the work that road freight companies are doing around their own drug testing, around their own processes. But there are still positives, particularly for general motorists. People are testing positive with THC, with methamphetamine, and they're just not safe on the road. It's incredibly dangerous. And when you look at NZTA's annual report and that graph there showing road deaths and serious injuries, there is a gradual trend downwards, but what they say is impaired driving is a real issue. Distraction is a real issue. People not wearing seatbelts is a particular issue. So what we're saying is, when it comes to road safety, we'll be acknowledging there's been a good downward trend, there's more work to do, but we need to be continuing to roll out and support that random roadside drug testing. We need to be cracking down harder on cell phone use and not wearing seatbelts, because New Zealand's increasingly behind its international partners on cracking down on that. And that's important because it keeps all road users and the truck drivers who live their working lives on the road, keeps them safe. So speaking of safer roads, I just want to acknowledge on behalf of Transporting New Zealand and our team that I'm really pleased to be launching our fatigue management road freight update supported by AutoSense today. If you haven't had a look at the update in front of you, we're really pleased to have had AutoSense's report to really dive into what the trends in good fatigue management are. Again, there's some good news there about fatalities going down, linked to fatigue impairment. But AutoSense have some really valuable insights showing what the key risks are. There's some technological solutions that you can do, that you can get into in order to help keep everyone safe. And a big thanks to VT Transport for agreeing to be profiled in this piece for their innovative use of technology in partnership with AutoSense, and also for our own board member, Greg Purd and Jackie's Trans Liquid Logistics, who have been operating an alternative fatigue management program successfully for a number of years. We're pleased to say that we've also got 4 policy recommendations in that report for how to do fatigue management better in New Zealand, and that includes emphasising the need for better truck rest stops throughout the country. And we're currently working with NZTA to agree what the priority areas are for where we need better appropriate facilities for drivers to have a good, decent rest without getting, criticised by other road users for just parking up and taking necessary breaks. And finally, to touch on supporting our workforce, look, the economic downturn and the tough times of around 2025, 2026, I think have masked the state of the kind of crisis that trucking is heading into with our ageing workforce. 1 in 10 drivers are over 65, 1 in 3 are over 55, and half of road freight businesses, according to surveys we've completed, think that 25% or more of their drivers might retire or leave the industry within the next 5 years. So that's why Transporting New Zealand has been keeping the pressure on. We organised a coalition of different driving organisations, MITO, Bus and Coach Association, National Road Carriers, in order to keep the issue, to keep pushing for more support for driver licensing in schools, more support for community-based education to get people in into their licences and in a better position to succeed. And I'd encourage everyone, if you haven't, have a look at our petition, sign it up, support it, and we'll continue to keep this pushed. I also say I'm very grateful to our sector group leaders for helping us develop our proposal for streamlining the process to your Class 4 and 5 licence for under 25s. That'll be based around being able to get your licence if you can establish that you've completed a certain number of hours rather than a time stand down, and also completed a more rigorous assessment. More detail on that coming this year. Driving freight productivity, that's already been touched on, I think, pretty effectively by Dom and by Cam. The thing is, Transporting New Zealand has put real effort into making sure that we're leading the charge on road freight productivity. There's a current reform program for the land transport rules that's about removing the requirement for 50 max permits. We want to go further. We want to make it easier for high productivity motor vehicles to get permitted and operate on more of the roading network. The fuel crisis has resulted in NZTA accelerating work to review bridges and culverts that need to be improved in order to help that happen. And just down the corner, you've got Minister Peters there in an election year. The tribalism over rail versus road is coming back this year, unfortunately. There's a school of thought that rail is the solution regardless of what the question is. I think that Transport New Zealand absolutely accepts that there's an important role for rail to play, but we want that to be well evidenced and for them to be producing really good value for money when they're getting roading investment, particularly if that comes from road user charges and fuel excise duty. So just a final call from me. Transporting New Zealand's advocacy works because they know it comes from the industry. It's great that we've got our national team of membership advisors and we've got us in Wellington, but they want to be hearing your opportunities, your challenges, and what needs to happen next. So I'd say please take the opportunity to talk to the team, to join our events throughout the year, and at the sector group days, let us know what we're doing and what we need to be working on, because our advocacy works best when we're really tied in with what our members want. Thank you very much, and can't wait for the rest of the conference. Thank you.